welcome to the Metal Voice. Today on the show, a very cool episode. We're going prog rock with Martin Popoff. Martin, what's going on?
Hey, nothing much, Jimmy. Thanks for having me. This is very, very cool. We get to talk prog instead of metal for once.
Many of the metalheads have been influenced by many members of the band Yes. Chris Squire.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I mean, you and I have talked before about kind of the roots of progressive metal, and I would say the roots of progressive metal itself are definitely Rush. Rush, I think, is the first progressive metal band. But, Yes is probably the band that is the precursor, the proto-progressive metal band. I mean, a little bit of Yes, a little bit of King Crimson, a little bit of Genesis, but Yes is the one that I think more so a lot of metal people like Yes, and they like prog in general.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always that connection. I mean, Steve Harris, Geddy Lee, very influenced by Chris Squire, bassist of Yes. Steve Howe influenced a generation of guitarists, especially in metal. Bill Bruford and Rick Wakeman, huge influences in the metal community. So here we go. Martin Popoff's new book, Yes, A Time and a Word.
Got a copy of it right here.
There it is. There it is. Very nice cover, by the way. And let's go through it quickly. The whole story of Yes, all the drama, all the dirt. You ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
First two albums Yes comes out with. Steve Howe, for some of you who may or may not know, was not the guitarist. It was Peter Banks who was the guitarist. The Yes album and Time and a Word. Martin.
Well, yeah, I mean, right from the start, this was a band of very strong personalities. They all knew what they wanted to do. I mean, John Anderson, Bill Bruford, these people do not suffer fools gladly. They definitely have a vision of what they want to do, and when people kind of fall away and don't have that same vision, it moves on quickly. So those first two albums are considered, I mean, they are fairly proggy albums, but they also have a little bit of psych, a little bit of 60s pop to them as well. They're a band of vocalists. They love vocals. So John and Chris are strong elements within this band. But you're right. At one point, I mean, there's a change, and Steve Howe comes in, and they essentially put together 3 records that are considered the cornerstone of the Yes catalog. The Yes album was a big album with a lot of hits. Fragile had Roundabout, which it's their biggest hit single, and is also, it was a big hit album. But then, 1972, they come out with Close to the Edge, and what happens here, I mean, I was thinking at one point I might do a book of the top 500 progressive rock albums of all time, and I started to take a poll for that. It's just been kind of a bit of a shelf project, but as I was taking that poll, it basically turned out that Close to the Edge is going to win that poll. Basically, Yes, Close to the Edge is the greatest progressive rock album of all time.
Tony Kaye, who was from the beginning in the band, they let go of him after the Yes album. I mean, and the reason for it was, which I love this, is because he refused to play the synthesizer.
And the funny thing about this band is that you think they're going to be really kind of ethereal and strange guys, but they're actually just very nose to the grindstone working guys. They're hard workers, they're businessmen, they're communicators. So at that point, you really have a band that is clicking as personalities as well.
And also, I mean, I remember reading about this. They were all vegetarians except for Rick Wakeman, and that kind of threw everybody off in the band. And another story in Tales from Topographic, on that tour, Rick Wakeman was so out of it. He's just so not into being on that tour that he used to just eat his food as the band was playing because he was so bored.
I don't remember exactly how many times it happened, but definitely he's eating a curry on stage with his keyboards or whatever. But that the point there is that he was not happy with that record. That record is crazy esoteric and weird. It's a double album of like strange, overlapping Eastern mysticism and philosophies. It barely has any songs on it. There's some beautiful music on it, but it's just it's about as proggy and as indulgent an album could possibly get. And they were like severely derided for that record. So, but then to their credit, Relayer is not a very commercial album either. But of course, at that point, Rick Wakeman's gone, and you've got Patrick Moratz coming in. So there you've got, yet another record that, 2 in a row that are just not very commercial at all.
And actually, Rick Wakeman does come back for Going for the One.
Yeah.
And then Tormato, which he's still, there's the same lineup as Going for the One, but Tormato just threw everybody off. Now they're going for a bunch of short songs, which with a bizarre album cover.
I think Going for the One is probably my favorite Yes album of all time. I think it's got some good catchy short songs, but it also has long songs. It's got a great recording. It's just a well-written, well-crafted album. I think that was basically Yes at their peak. And Tormato, you know, there's a lot of good music on that, and it actually did pretty well. But yeah, those two go as a bit of a pair, and then we get lots of drama with drama, of course.
Drama. So Anderson's gone. The first time Anderson's ever been gone in Yes, and so is Rick Wakeman. They bring in the Buggles.
So essentially what you have is you have a new keyboardist, but the crazy thing is you have a new lead singer. And on the record, he's amazing. He even sounds exactly like John Anderson, really. I mean, you know, what's the meaning of the word exactly? But I mean, he basically, I think any sort of mid-level fan to lower could play that record and think it was John Anderson, which is quite amazing. The problem with him was he didn't have much of a stage presence. He didn't like playing live. He was shy live, and so he got kind of crucified when this moved over to the live environment. You know, he was already crucified because John Anderson isn't even there. But it is a great album. I've never not liked Emma. Yeah.
The band disbands. Then there's rumors. You know, Chris Squire and Alan White joining Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, XYZ. I mean, is there anything about that in your book, or?
So basically, in this book, I cover off in quite a bit of detail all the side bands, including Asia, and all the solo projects of everybody. But one that didn't get off the ground is this XYZ situation. And you're right. I mean, they did do a little bit of jamming, trying to get things off the ground. You know, it was a little bit trying to get Jimmy and Robert out of their doldrums, you know, when John Bonham died. It just didn't really go anywhere. Robert's, you know, heart and head really wasn't in it. Jimmy, I think, was a little more game to try do something with it. And you can hear some of these sessions. I believe a bunch of this is all on YouTube. And then what happened was little bits of those songs would show up on later projects. Don't quote me on this, but I think even in The Firm. And later Yes albums. So little bits and pieces.
Survived.
You could draw a little bit of a line to find where parts that these guys were trying to put together were used on later albums. So yeah, that would have been very cool to have that band happen.
Then we go to Chris Squire saying, you know what, I'm going to start this new band called Cinema. He gets Trevor Rabin, and, you know, brings in Alan White, and the only missing, and Tony Kaye for that matter, the only person missing was John Anderson, convinces him finally before the recording of the album to join the album, and we get probably one of the biggest commercially successful albums called 90125.
And yeah, they have just this crazy out of left field, nobody expected it, big multi-platinum album in 90125. And then they followed up with Big Generator, which I believe goes single platinum, I think. And it's a very similar album to it. So this is their like world beating, we're conquering the world years.
But you know, you had some issues because it kind of sagged after Big Generator, and later on, you have Bruford, or Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe, or whatever that order is. Their little Yes, without Chris Squire, and I guess Chris Squire owned the name at the time, so they couldn't go under the banner of Yes. Then you had Chris Squire's version of Yes that was touring at the same time, and then the record company finally convinced them, hey guys, let's do a union album and a union tour, and that means the whole gang of Yes, be it 2 keyboardists, 2 drummers, etc., on tour. What was that period like?
I suppose the Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe is a little bit more esoteric and proggy. And the Union album had a hit or two. It did all right out there, and of course they did get a lot of press for doing this big massive thing. So yeah, there's some great music there. And again, I always treat those 2 records as a pair.
Yeah, and then of course, you know, later on, there were a lot of albums with different combinations of different members of the Yes family.
So after Union, they've got Talk, they've got these Keys to Ascension albums. They become a prog band under the radar again. The Roger Dean artwork is back. There's these long songs. You know, a lot of people don't know a lot of that material. They do kind of a really cool rocky album. One of my favorites from the middle years, Open Your Eyes. That's kind of the Billy Sherwood, Steve Howe, Buttonheads years. That's the modern sounding band. The latter, Magnification, they do a classical tour. Those are proggy albums. So yes, we arrive at Fly From Here. And I remember interviewing the guys at the time, and I just thought it was kind of funny that that they hired a guy that essentially doesn't do writing. It's like, I don't do writing kind of thing, or you know, he wasn't going to contribute anything writing wise. And I thought, you're Yes, you know, you can go out and get the right guy for this job. But yeah, so what happens now? Then they end up with John Davison. You do get a guy in here, and they put out Heaven and Earth, which is now, you know, it's now two and a half years old or something like that. I mean, hopefully they'll be making more music.
All right, so Chris Squire sadly passes away. The guy who owns the name to Yes. So now it's a free-for-all. Now we have two Yeses once again.
I've got a lot of quotes in there, and I've learned through those quotes that this is a band that they don't really seem to have passionate grudges. I mean, it is all just business for them. They can go away, they can break up, they can reform. They just sit down around a table and hash this stuff out. So they're kind of like mature guys about this. I really don't think that people are hopping mad in either of the camps about there being the official Yes, which has Billy Sherwood replacing the sadly departed Chris Squire, and then what you have is this other configuration, which feels, of course, more like the 90125 band, because it's John Anderson, Trevor Rabin, Rick Wakeman is in that situation as well.
There you have it, Martin Popoff, his new book, Yes, A Time and a Word. Martin, you want to show your book?
This is my 50th book, and it's the first prog one. I had a punk one just come out, a new Ramones coffee table book, but I want to do more prog in the future. I love prog.
There you have it, Martin Popoff. Thanks for being on the show again, Martin. And thanks. I'm really looking forward to reading your book. And we could talk about Yes another time again.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy.
All right, man. Catch you next time on The Metal Voice.